Okay, so thanks again for coming back, MacKenzie.
No problem.
There were just a few things that I thought were so intriguing that, silly me, I missed on the first round.
Not even.
But, you know, we covered a lot of interesting territory. So it's just a tribute to how interesting you are.
Thank you.
Okay, so this was one of the things, you know, like you skimmed over like very briefly the beauty pageant.
Yes.
Can we just talk about that for a minute?
Oh, totally. It's wild.
Why? How did you do
I
this?
think so. I grew up an athlete. I was a very decorated swimmer, junior Olympian. I think like 6 or 8 times. I cannot remember. I held a bunch of like state records and national records and was nationally ranked and all this stuff. And simultaneously, I horseback rode. So I became pro-am in like the 5th grade and like traveled around the country riding. Same thing with swimming, did meets all around the country. Was very serious about it.
Overachiever.
I always say that I am truly like one of the founding members of Overachievers Anonymous for the like millennial era. So I had done all of that and I got to college. I knew I wasn't going to continue horses because as anybody can expect, it's a very expensive sport to be in. Even though Florida is like the capital of professional hunter jumpers. But I was kind of like, okay, I'm going to step away. I'm going to focus on swimming. Go to college to swim, D1 swimmer, get there, get injured. And I'm kind of faced with, what do you want to do? Do you want to, take this kind of long road back to the sport, or do you want to retire unexpectedly before you ever thought you would as a teenager? And so here I was, a freshman in college. I'm in a new place. I simultaneously have my identity kind of go away and I retire at the ripe old age of 18. And so, I truly was the person that everybody thought, I used to prepare people of like, I'm going to the Olympics. Now in the pageant, I always say my favorite thing in 2 Truths, 1 Lie. Like one of them is I've competed against every member of the Phelps family except the children, because Nicole, his wife, was my Miss California, and Michael was one of kind of the people I trained with and would see at North Baltimore swim meets. But anyway, so I retire, have this major identity crisis where I'm kind of like, who am I if I'm not a swimmer? Who am I if I'm not an athlete? And kind of had a bit of a quarter life crisis on the eve of my 20th birthday, and came back to my family and friends with a list of everything I wanted to accomplish before I turned 30. On that list was run a marathon. And so I trained. I was not a runner. I'm not even remotely a runner. Trained for the marathon, finished this marathon. And my best friend turns to me and says, so what's next? And I said, I think I want to go to Miss Universe. And everybody kind of, went, okay, all right, what does that involve? And I said, I don't know, but I'm going to figure it out. And went to the Miss USA. I affectionately say I have only attended Miss USA twice in my life. Once as an attendee and the other time as a contestant. So I go in for the 2009 year, I watch it. Similar to the memory competition, I kind of reverse engineer, like, who trained this person? Okay, X amount of women keep winning from Puerto Rico. Who's training them? And literally assembled this team of like a world record holding pageant coach named Grace Fontecha, who truly is like an angel who changed my life. Had this incredible dress designer who had clothed the last like 10 Miss Universe winners, all these people. Compete in my state pageant. I put months. I mean, my sorority sisters say I left them as a sweaty tomboy sophomore year, and I came back as an entirely different person. I had been living in Puerto Rico training with all of these kind of greats, and came back to school, and nobody really knew. I didn't tell anybody I was doing a pageant. I think Miss DC USA happened around like the weekend of Thanksgiving. So thankfully I was already home. I sent a very cryptic message to my professors that said, I may or may not be in class on Monday after Thanksgiving break, but if that changes, I'll let you know. And I had, that night, stepped onto a pageant stage for the first time ever, competed, won. And I had a great professor who sent me a note very late Sunday night, because I guess she had been looking on AP to find something she needed for class. and it was a picture of me winning. And she sent it back and she goes, so I'm gonna assume you're not going to be in class on Monday morning. And I was like, you would be correct. And so had to email, but yeah, it was a whirlwind year of, representing my home, the district, going to school in Miami, flying back and forth. I was a double major. I was doing a TV show. I was doing all this stuff, and it was incredible. My pageant coach basically moved in with me for the months leading up to Miss USA because everybody wanted me to take the year off from school for my reign. And my dad was like, absolutely not. This was not part of the plan. So it was an insane year. It's why I think when we first talked, I said that was one of the things that proved to me you can literally break anything down into pieces that you can then go after.
And so, okay, so with the beauty pageant, was it the beauty part that was intriguing to you, or what was it that really kind of like reached out and grabbed you and said, like, I want to do this?
I had always watched it with my mother. My mother had been a model. She had been a couture fit model in Paris, and I always admired and loved that glamour about her. And for anybody that's wondering, pageantry and modeling are in no way, shape, or form similar to each other. And so I really loved the glamour. And when I was a young girl, Shantae Hinton, who was the then Miss DC, went on to become Miss USA. And that particular year, the entire top 5 were Black women. And that just left such an impression on me as a kid that I was like, if I could ever be that beautiful or interesting or whatever, I would love to do that. And I didn't see that as an option for myself for who I was and how I saw myself. And as a senior in high school, there was a girl who had won Miss Maryland who came to speak. And I like to say to one of my friends I'm still close with that I just remembered the room was very loud. And I remember a girl taking a very sparkly crown out of a box. And I remember saying to the entire row of other seniors, I was like, shut up. I don't know what's happening. I was so locked in. So I think, I don't know what it was. It was just the perfect storm that in that moment when my best friend said, what's next? I think my brain just went like, you're not a runner. Maybe we can, and we just finished a marathon. Maybe we can pull off being Miss Universe. And although I did not reach my ultimate goal, I'm always proud that it's like to have been in the top 20 for Miss USA, to have gotten that far. It was probably a heck of a lot closer than I would have gotten in any other scenario. But yeah,
unbelievable. And so, in beauty pageants, I haven't watched one in a very long time. I think the last one I watched was the Sandra Bullock beauty pageant movie. But do you have to give a speech about something in particular? Like, do you have to show a talent and have a speech? Like,
so
what was your speech and what was your talent?
So that is the Miss America world. So I like to say, as our reigning queen at the time, Rima Fakih said that everybody hated, it's like Miss America is the girl next door. Miss USA is the girl you wish lived next door. So Miss America is your scholarship pageant where there's talent and platforms and community service. Miss USA, now it's changed, but at the time when we competed, it was strictly a beauty pageant. So it was evening gown, swimsuit. There was an interview portion, but like what most people know it for is being this kind of like glamorous women who are selected for a modeling contract kind of women. And then the big differentiator between USA and America is Miss America is the end of the title. For Miss USA, you then go on to compete at Miss Universe if you win.
Oh, so they're like different divisions.
Yes, they're different organizations completely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I had no idea. There you go.
Yeah.
And what was the biggest kind of learning that you took away from then that it was Miss USA. No, it was Miss America.
Yeah, the Miss USA. Miss USA competition. I think there were a couple people I would say, like, Grace taught me so much that I don't think I could fit it in that answer. But I would say one of the people, kind of the late, great Don Baker, who was the interview coach. I thought he was one of the most incredible people, not just teaching you the importance of kind of extemporaneous speaking and being able to think that quickly, but really the power of kind of knowledge and intellect that it plays into creating something behind your eyes. I used to say it was funny, I still, from that day, my friends make fun of me. I'm like, my favorite thing I learned on the first day was he was talking about like the importance of expanding your vocabulary. So for no reason, sometimes my favorite word is conflagration, which is like an uproarious flame, like a huge explosion kind of thing. And I was like, it's my favorite because he said it at the time, or he said like cacophony. And I remember being like, what's the point of learning all these big words? And he said, it's not about you going out there and using kind of this worldly vocabulary to impress people, but it's the idea that the more you know, the more it creates that sparkle when people ask you questions. It creates that energy behind your eyes that shows there's somebody home. And I used to think it was so great that he would say, you know, the first time he ever went to a pageant and he watched a young woman walk down the runway and somebody said she's going to win, and he was kind of like, how do you know? And they said, like, look at her eyes like sparkle and light up as she's walking. And he said he just really kind of followed the like, well, what creates the sparkle? You know, and I laugh because I think about at the time when I was training with Dawn for the pageant, I was doing sports television. And I remember one of the notes I got from her producer is he said, you're talking about a player injury and your eyes are just like lighting up while, you know, you got all this glitter thing. And I said, I don't know what to do about that. I don't know how to be dead behind the eyes. I mean, if you could show me maybe some tips. And I always attribute to Dawn kind of that reigniting that knowledge and engaging with new and interesting things and literature and all of this stuff is not just about having this huge kind of well of information in your head, but it allows you to kind of enhance who you are as a person and what makes you magnetic for people to be drawn to.
Interesting. Okay, that's leaving me with a lot to think about. And then speaking about knowledge and learning, the other thing I wanted to ask you about in a little bit more depth was the ultra memory.
Yes.
Okay, so why did that pique your curiosity? I think we touched on that a little bit. And then how do you actually do it? How do you train for it?
Oh my gosh.
What does that is? You tell me a little more.
Yeah. So what piqued my interest, like I said, was watching that Netflix documentary, which is crazy. I'm sure people are like, who does that? But I'm the same person that can watch a beauty pageant and be like, I think I can do that. The same person that watches a marathon on NBC Sports and goes like, that can't be too hard, right? Like anybody can do that. But I think I was really drawn to it. Just one as a way to honor my grandmother who had dealt with dementia. And I think as another, I just found it really fascinating. I am very into challenging my own limiting beliefs about myself. So there's something very fun about constantly saying to people like, I forgot your name. Oh, I got a crap memory. Oh God, like my mind's like a sieve. I'm like a goldfish. And then being able to kind of turn around and change that. So in terms of the training, it's a lot like pageantry in the sense that on the surface, people think they know what it involves. And then when you get into it, they're like, no, I don't want to do that. I have no interest in doing all of that. So I think the first thing, so I was lucky enough to train with Nelson Dulles, who is the 5-time US memory champion, holds an incredible amount of world records. He was one of the gentlemen in the documentary. Lucky enough that he attended my undergrad alma mater. So I was able to like, you know, slide in his DMs respectfully to try to see if he was training anyone. And so worked with him. And the first thing that Nelson really got on me about was like, it's energy management is the first part of memory training that is so big, because you can't get exhausted or tired or, you know, have that middle of the day slump if you're in the middle of competition. So that was kind of the first step of kind of like the health and wellness part, which I didn't see. Was that
coming. Nutrition and drinking
nutrition, water, exercise. It's a lot of exercise. It's a lot of the sleeping. It's a lot of like, you start looking at things through the lens, not so much of, oh, I got to get my sleep, I got to get my rest, but in the sense of, oh, I got to get X amount of sleep because I need that kind of, I like to say sleep is like the rinse cycle for your brain. It's like, oh, great. Okay. I gotta get the proper kind of sleep so I can like wash my brain and go over again. You know, it's kind of this fascination with natural nootropics and figuring out kind of the edge that you can create for yourself. And then within that, like the first kind of big tier is there's a lot of, I like to say memory training got me out of meditating and made that practice very meditative. You spend a lot of time doing visualization. So kind of the method of loci, the what people know as memory palaces.
Yeah. I was gonna ask.
Yeah, it's sitting down. I mean, I had at one point in the beginning, we were doing 4 memory palaces with 20 locations each. So like sitting down and imagining, literally looking at my apartment and then just closing my eyes and sitting and remembering all these corners of my apartment and identifying spots and basically like mentally putting up like, that's location number 1, that's 2, that's 3, that's 4, that's 5. Going to my parents' house, that's 1, that's 2, that's 3, that's 4, that's 5 in my mind. I mean, at one point I had friends teasing me because I go to Disneyland a lot. And I said, well, I'm also going so I can turn it into a memory palace. And they were like, right.
It'll work.
You can even turn, they're like, okay. And you can even turn kind of small things into a memory palace, right? Like I could take the keyboard of my laptop and kind of think through what the keys look like, and then spend time with my eyes closed, like reimagining where the letters are located and identify that little keyboard as a memory palace. And then it's really just getting into the different systems. So I use, there's something called the major system, which is kind of just this idea of like, 1A, 2B, or, even when I'm like right now I'm learning Dutch, people are probably listening to this being like, is there anything weird that you don't do? So it's like the peg method of like pegging, like the word huwelijk is marriage in Dutch, but like I hear it in my brain to remember it as like, I see it as like Hugh, look over there, as huwelijk, as for, marriage, matrimony, and all this kind of stuff. But the big one I had to work on that actually took a lot of time, and this is truly like the meta learning of memory, is I spent an inordinate amount of time in the beginning. There's something called a PAO system, person action object, where you have to first learn something called the Dominic system. So the Dominic system is assigning each digit 0 through 9 a letter. So 0 is O, 1 is A, 2 is B, 3 is C, D is 4, 5 is E, S is 6. I know that's confusing, y'all, but it looks like a 6. 7 is G, because I guess 7 looks like a G upside down. 8 is H, and 9 is N. I know, all crazy. Okay. But you have the Dominic system, and then you would take something like 0, 0. And so 0, 0 is OO. And then you take a person action object. And so using my memory palace, 0, 0 is Ozzy Osbourne in my entry in my doorway. The action is like biting the head off a bat, and the object is a bat. So you literally go through, I went through every number. I spent probably weeks just getting my PAO system down, where it was like from 0, 0 to 9, 9. And I stored those 100 digit sets all throughout my apartment in my memory palace. So like I could, and everything is different. So like for me, 33 is my Jesus year. So 33 for me was Jesus in my television, turning water into wine, and the object was wine. So each number having its own thing. For example, this might be insane. So 31 was Charlie's Angels doing their iconic pose, holding a blow dryer. 24 was Kobe Bryant kind of doing a fast break with a black mamba wrapped around his ankle. And then 17 was Ariana Grande doing the splits with a big ponytail. And what you do then when you get kind of like a chain of numbers is each set of 2 digits, first set of 2 digits is the person, second set is the action, last one is the object. So for example, 24,000, or let me think, 241,731 would be Kobe Bryant doing the splits, holding a hairdryer.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's like, particularly for memorizing numbers.
That's for memorizing numbers. Now,
pi to the blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. If you're trying to remember like all the digits of pi, you would, for me at least, I would keep going like 2 digit sets and be like, okay, for 41, X. And then same thing with cards. You go through a deck of cards. Each card is a person, action, object. So when you see people speed memorizing decks of cards, a lot of times they're looking at a group of threes. There's some people that can do like 3-digit sets, more power to them. That's not me. I'm not good at that. But for me, the Dominic system made the most sense to come up with it. And then it's very customizable. Like I can make it what makes sense to me. So like 32 was Carson Daly. Or no, 32 was, I'm forgetting it was Carson Daly running on a treadmill, because I had once seen him on a treadmill. We were at the same gym together in New York. And he was like sweating through his t-shirt. And I think what I love as somebody with an ADHD brain is the crazier and more visceral you make these images, the easier it is to remember. Like you kind of want to have like emotion. So like some of them absolutely are shareable with people. Some of them are like, nobody ever needs to know what that system, like what that number. Yeah, it's like some of those you're like, you never need to know what that number represents, but I'll know what the number 13 is for the rest of my life.
And then do you put them together in a narrative?
So that's what the person, action, object is.
Yeah.
So like in the case of that big long number I gave, it's 24.
Yeah.
So is the beginning of so that's Kobe Bryant. 17 is the action for 17. So doing the splits. And then 31 is, holding the hair dryer, because it's the object from what the PAO system is for just the 31.
So if you were memorizing pi to the, I don't know, how many numbers would you memorize it?
Yeah.
30 numbers, 50 or?
I would keep
keep that narrative going?
Yeah. I would do like 6 well, at least for me. So some people can memorize multiple digit sets. For me, it would be like 6-digit sets at a time of PAO. So it would be whatever that set of 6 represents, whatever the next set of 6, so on and so forth. Images are a little bit easier, because that really was just like speed going through images and kind of assigning stories of kind of, for some reason grouping of 3 made sense for me, of like doing that. And then they throw in like Lumosity. I know some people are probably like, do those apps work? But that's actually an app that's used in competition, is Lumosity. And so, so the more training on something as simple as a Lumosity app, it helps. And then names is very difficult for me. Names are extremely difficult, and words, which would, a lot of people probably be like, but it's words. It's easier to remember words. But again, it's that speed. And that's like the beauty of competition, is you learn what you're good at and what you're not. And so for me too, names, I have to like Nelson kind of taught us this as well. It's like, I have to add something unique. So it's like, okay, Connie. And then I would be like, okay, this top, like scallop edge top. So maybe I'm going to turn it into like, you've got a bunch of like shellfish all across the collar of your neck. All right, next person. Madison, she's wearing like a really kind of crazy green shirt. Okay, I'm just going to see like her hair is grass. Like it's really, your limit on your memory palaces, the images, is truly the only limit of your imagination. So if you, I think if you are overly practical, probably the concept of memorizing things and memory competitions are like, what? No, absolutely not. But I think if you can get really imaginative, whether it's like, and it applies for school, it's like the techniques I know now, I wish I had known then, for the things I've learned in terms of memorizing text or memorizing the periodic table. I think that's the really cool part to me in all of this that I've learned, is that
which is so crazy, right? Like at school, they just expect you to learn the periodic table, and you're like, well, how? Like,
and I think that's the funny part,
how your brain works, and not understanding.
There is a very cool gentleman, Jim Quick, and he had an episode of his podcast that he was talking about memorizing the periodic table, and he goes through this crazy story of like the car from Knight Rider has a balloon tied to the door. And as the balloon goes up, you realize there's batteries falling out of the car and all this stuff. And he goes through this. And then he steps back after he's told this insane story. And he's like, okay, what did he say? He was like, the balloon was helium. the batteries falling out of it were lithium. And he like goes through this kind of insane story he's told you that you've memorized.
Yeah.
And he says, okay, now you know the first 10 elements in the periodic table in order. And it's kind of like, I remember the first time I heard that, the first time I ever learned any of this, it almost made me a little sad, because I was like, if somebody had explained this kind of rote memorization stuff with this way, you know, it's like, how much of the early years of school are just memorize these multiplication tables, now say it back to me.
Yeah.
And for those of us, especially with like neurodivergent brains, we're like taking it super literal, trying to solve every problem. We don't realize that like Katie at the desk next to us has just memorized that's what that is. Like, we're trying to figure out the rules and how it makes sense. And I almost got a little sad for myself, where I was like, oh my God, if I had known some of these techniques, I think school would have been like, it wouldn't have felt so overwhelming.
And it would have been more fun.
Yes.
Because there's the silly aspect of it, right? Like there's that silly part that doesn't, school for the most part is not very silly and not very playful and fun. And imagine, like you just imagine.
Or it's like, I think when I think of the periodic table, it's like, I had my entire life set that I wanted to be a doctor. And I took a chemistry class, like an advanced chemistry class, and we were balancing chemical equations. When I tell you that was my downfall early on in high school, and in AP chemistry was balancing chemical equations to a point that I was like losing my mind. I remember my professor being like, well, see, the rule is this and this and this. If I had been able to almost memorize the answers, memorize the algorithm, you know, kind of get a baseline, or even just memorize the periodic table. If somebody had said, just because you're an adult doesn't mean we can't draw balloons on helium on the chart. It would have been a game changer. It would have changed everything. But instead, it's like, you stop playing the further you get along in school. And as you take that play away, things just get harder. You go from seeing the number 3 as 3 beads or 3 bananas or 3 potatoes, and instead it's like, this is the number 3. But if
okay, so my son who is dyslexic, he would always, as a preschooler, he always said that letter, he called an H giraffe. He was like, oh, the giraffe. And I was like, what are you talking about? Oh, the giraffe. And I was like, oh, yeah, oh, right. Like, it kind of looks like a giraffe. I totally get it. A lowercase h. But it's, you know, it totally makes sense. And it's so interesting the way that like things we don't know about our brain that it can do, right? So I know, because I've watched some of these videos that I've done, when I'm thinking, I look over there. That's where my thinking brain is. And so it always looks like I'm like staring off into space, but I'm thinking, like, that's where I think. I was also going to mention the other thing, when people tell me their names, I have to stop and I write them out in my brain. Yeah. Like I do it in pen, like in cursive.
Exactly.
So I'll do MacKenzie and I'm like, okay, hold on. It's going to take me a second. like I'm crazy, but it's like these things we don't know about our brain, right? How it functions. Okay. So you were training. How much did you train? What did training look like?
Yeah, I will say, because there are probably people listening who are like, well, you could have done more. Absolutely, I could have. I definitely had a minimum of 15 minutes every day rule that I gave to, and that, again, it's because I think I also was like, I'm going to learn this and I'm going to compete, but I'm not going to do well. And then I got a taste of like what it felt like to do exceptionally well in one category. And I thought, oh, I got to do more time. But I really started with just 15 minutes. I kind of ramped it up more every day of kind of playing those Lumosity games, reviewing my PAO system. I used this app called Anki for that, or Anki. I'm not sure how to spell it, ANKI, but it's a flashcard app that uses spaced repetition. And so I put my PAO system on these flashcards, these digital flashcards, and just continue to review them regularly to remind myself, like, what's 34, what's 21, what's 89, what's 92, after I had kind of come up with the full system, and just reviewing what that is. And that was like, that took some time. And then that's why I said it became a very meditative practice, because you're sitting for a bit every day. Once I had all 100 digits, I would sit on my couch, close my eyes, and walk through my entire apartment, going to look at all 100 digit sets of like just like being like, okay, like I remember at one point it was like Daenerys Targaryen on behind me on my sofa, like slaying dragons. I remember it was like at the height of WandaVision. So I think Elizabeth Olsen was one of the numbers that was, I think 50. So that was like Wanda Maximoff in her pose wearing her Scarlet Witch outfit with like a fireball in her hand over my little like coffee table. But that would be kind of part of my day of doing that. And then I would play, there's a great website called Memory League, and I would go in there and I would do 30 images, memorize 30 images in a minute, memorize 30 digits, 30 digits in a minute, and just kind of every day go back through that, do 30 names, and just continue. And I kept track of all of it, so you can kind of see, in addition to keeping track of your exercise and food, where it's like you had a day where it dipped down, it was like, right, I got really bad sleep the night before. Oh, right. That was the day I didn't really like, you know, have a good breakfast. And since I'm an early riser, I did all of it first thing in the morning before the sun was up. And then sometimes I just throughout the week play games of like, see a license plate, snap a picture of it so I could have it on my phone, but I would go about my day, and then at the end of the day try to recall all these like numbers I had recorded running into throughout the day. And you know, love to freak my parents out on road trips where I'd be like, yeah, that license plate of the van that we saw like 18 minutes ago or whatever. I'd be like, you like to know what it was? Or like we'd get to the next state and I was like, so this was the license plate back in Colorado. But yeah, the training schedule wasn't nearly as crazy as I think people would think, but I have a feeling this year training for next year, it will get a little crazy.
Okay, so two questions. The visualization, were you already into visualization as an athlete? Was that something that you carried over?
Absolutely. I've always had a very active imagination, so I can see a lot of visual mental pictures. That was something carried from athletics. Visual mental picture is literally something that Don Baker taught me during pageantry. It was like, he always said the reason he always said the reason girls failed interview is that they could not imagine or see the scene that was painted to them in the question. So if the person's asking you, you know, how would you fight or speak out on behalf of racial justice, they were not seeing a visual mental picture that they were speaking to in that moment. So it was like, hence the reason it's like, watch the news, read books, all this stuff so that you can see something that you're speaking to. So the concept of like sitting down and, you know, seeing Governor Newsom in my fridge fighting a grizzly bear was not a strange thought for my mind to wander to. But yeah, it worked out.
And so when you say that this year, okay, wait a minute, before we got there, what was the biggest challenge of training?
Oh, it was absolutely taking it seriously. I think I truly was kind of like, we're just farting around, whatever, who cares? Like, who really cares about this? But I think I really had to, I think that's why I had to compete, because if I just had given myself this kind of like, whatever, it became hard to keep myself to a schedule when the goal was like, we'll just do it to do it. And it was like, once I had put money down, signed up for a competition, and there was a due date, I had to be like, hey, everybody, I love you guys. We can't go on a hike yet. I need to do my memory league work, or I need to do Lumosity, or like, I need you to read these numbers out to me before we start this hike. And then I'll repeat them back to you when we come back.
Okay. That's yeah. I mean, so it takes incredible self-discipline.
Yes. That was hard.
Once you set that date. So yeah, so you knew how to motivate yourself.
Yes, I knew, like, finding the motivation is hard because, you know, you never feel like you use this stuff in anything, but then I think people will be surprised you find that you actually do. Even this simple exercise we use called tossing the pen. So it's like, if I needed to remind myself, didn't have a piece of paper on me, like, oh, I got to call so-and-so tomorrow morning, I would grab like the randomest object that I could throw and I would toss it from my bed to like someplace super random. So usually it was a pen. I would toss the pen, and on my way to the bathroom in the morning, I'd be like, oh, right, I need to call so-and-so about this. Like, it was it was valuable in those moments when you're like having conversation, like my boss now will be like, hey, can I call you real quick? And I'm like, yeah, go ahead. And she'll give me a ring and she's telling me something wildly important. And so I'll like kind of massage my ears or something as she's saying it. And I repeat it back. And then later when I come home to go retrieve that information, I'm like rubbing my ear and repeating what it was that I had like attached to that object or kind of that action.
Yeah, I've heard about people like tying string around their finger, you know,
Yeah.
or something, that kind of thing, but you've taken it obviously next level. What are 3 practical tips that you would give someone to improve their memory?
Yeah, I think the first one is be present. I don't think anybody has a bad memory. A memory is a learned thing, but I think we're not willing to admit to ourselves the reason you don't remember that person's name is because you were not paying attention when they told you their name the first time. You were thinking about something else.
Much
So I
easier
think
to blame it on the hardware.
exactly. So I think that's something really cool that this whole process has taught me. It's like be where your feet are. So if somebody's telling you their name, listen to their name, repeat it, ask them something about themselves so that if you don't see a cool, interesting piece of clothing, they're like Melissa from Greenland. And you're like, oh, what's it like being from Greenland? They tell you an interesting, unique story. And now you have the thing. You know, a little bit later in conversation, you're like, Melissa, that is such a good point. It's like it forces you to be present. So like first and foremost, just memory is a learned skill, but like we all got to be more present in the moment and actually engaged and listening and active in that. The other one I would say is I would say get yourself on like an app like Lumosity, just play. You'd be surprised how simple those little apps are and how much they help you kind of improve your memory and teach you some new stuff. And then the other one I would say, the other practical skill, I would say definitely the memory palaces. Next time you're like remembering a grocery list, so a great one is like the 10 brain foods on my body. It's like the top of my head, my nose, my ear, my lips, my throat, my shoulders, my fingertips, my stomach, like kind of like my belly button and my tushy. When I think about the 10 locations, it's like when I think about brain superfoods, I see a big bowl of guacamole on the top of my head. So like I can peel off the top of my head, store some guacamole in there, get some chips, add avocado. For the other one, I think of olive oil just pouring out of my ears, olive oil. I think of the end of my nose being a big old blueberry that I can squish and it makes noise. That's blueberries. My teeth, I have a big old stalk of broccoli in them. On my shoulders, I wear like leafy greens, like a big piece of kale, like linebacker shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
My collar is where I keep a necklace of salmon. My fingers, the ends of my fingers are like yellow Cheeto dust. That's turmeric. My belly button, there's a big old walnut. And then the last superfood, sorry to be crass, everybody, it's chocolate. And obviously location number 10 is your tushy. So next time you're trying to like remember an interesting list, kind of take those points on your body. And maybe next time you go to the grocery store, imagine a small, simple list of 10 items and place it around your body on different spots and, you know, see what you can do. And at the end of it, you know, stop in one of the aisles, be like, I remembered all 10. Or stop and be like, hey, I did really good. I remembered 5. Okay. Next time I'm going to make it a more vivid image of like where this food in my belly button is stored. So yeah, those would be like my 3.
That's awesome. Okay. And then next steps.
Yes.
What's coming up next?
Next is preparing. I have a goal. I really want to break the top 20. My family are overly ambitious. They're like, you should go for the top 12 because the 10 get to go on to Orlando to compete. And then there are 2 alternates for kind of the national championships. So of course, my family are like, why not go all the way? Go for number 12. I'm like, guys, I just want to go 5 steps up from where I was. But yeah,
so we're at 25.
Yeah, I was at 25.
Nationally?
Yes, I want to work up to nationally. I want to work up to 20. My family, who are used to their overachiever daughter, are like, okay, so 12. And I'm like, you're all horrible people. And I'm also really fascinated right now because I've learned that so much of chess is memorizing algorithms. And same thing with Rubik's Cubes. I want to learn how to do those, because unfortunately Netflix has a documentary on speed cubing and we've learned nothing from our talks. I will watch a Netflix documentary and think I can do that. So I'm very fascinated by better learning chess and Rubik's Cubes in addition to my other memory stuff. And I'm also trying to become a polyglot this year. So that is a road in which I am currently learning Dutch. Then after I get Dutch down, it'll be German. And then from German, it'll be French. And then once we're in French, it's the Romance languages, and then ending with Arabic. Don't know why, but this is where we are.
Not Mandarin.
No, not Mandarin. Everybody keeps being like, you don't want to learn Mandarin? I'm like, let me get the Germanic into the Romance figured out and to Arabic, and then I'll circle back to like Asian languages.
Oh my gosh. And when is the book coming out, or the documentary?
I hopefully one day. My mother teases me all the time. She's like, you should write a book. So thankfully that's how we both ended up in the Atomic Essays group, because as I figured out, I was like, maybe I should just start writing all this stuff down, and one day I'll find a book amongst it.
Oh my gosh, I see it. I see it there. We'll be waiting. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. It's fascinating story. And good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.